All right. Good morning. Welcome to the AI Security Council's uh, rehash of our larger group session. We're going to cover the last topic, going a little bit deeper in depth around the transformation of security programs using AI. I'm Chris Kirschke. I'm the field CISO at Tuskira, and I lead the AI Security Council. I've been in InfoSec for about 27 years now, and Alex, would you like to introduce yourself? Mute. You're on mute.
Sorry for that. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Shamsutdinov. I'm VP and CISO for Upwork, a world largest job marketplace, and I've been in industry over 25 years, and within InfoSec over 15 years.
All right. Bakul?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Bakul Singhal. Great to be here and part of this panel. I started my journey as a software developer and pivoted to cybersecurity when I specialized my master's in information security space. It's been 15 plus years in this space. I had a chance to work in multiple industries ranging from retail, fintech, banking, and consulting. Currently, I'm working as an information security architect at Madden, and looking forward to our discussion today. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Charles, take us home.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. My name is Charles Gifford. I am the VP and the CISO for a company called Intrado. We are in public safety and we handle the bulk of 911 calls throughout the United States and Canada. And I'm looking forward to this discussion as well, like Baku, given the fact that I've been in InfoSec now for about as long as Chris has, and I'm still enjoying it, and I'm seeing AI transform a lot of things. Um, so
Awesome. So let's dig right into that, right? So, in our last session, we had probably about 30 of us and kind of talking a little bit about what we deem what transformed actually means, right? And how do you actually determine when you get to that state? And it doesn't have to be the entire program, but it could be one portion of your program where you felt that it was easier to start with. We've all seen the news around cloud code security and the disruption initially across the InfoSec market cap mostly. And then, kind of the realization that most of this is going to be around some of the more finite or binary aspects of security like AppSec. So I'd like to kind of get each of those experiences and thoughts around where those transformations and that determination of that is. And Charles, I'd love to start with you.
yeah, great. Thank you. I measure a lot of my security program through the CMMI model, and that's how I actually measure like AppSec and things like that in terms of, where we're at with developing and with the secure software development lifecycle. Overall, where I've seen that transformation occur is actually in the speed at which the development teams can now deliver our code and deliver it securely within the CI/CD pipeline. I mean, the automation of a lot of the security with respect to, analyzing secrets and analyzing the code itself, those things, they were separate steps sometimes. Now we can bring it all together and it can be done quickly, and our coders can be supported by AI and actually get instantaneous results before they even check in, which is phenomenal when you start to talk about how do we really shift security to the left, which has been our goal since the beginning. And that's where I really see it transforming. So when you start to measure the lines of code that are written securely with the help of AI and your development teams, you can really start to measure how that transformation is looking in AppSec. And so that's one aspect. And then I turn it over to my other panelists.
So, Bakul?
Yeah. So one of the things I would like to second and echo on the Charles, that is something we have seen, and I'm seeing in my organization as well, especially on the development side and SDLC process. There's the fast turnaround in terms of building the code. Time has shifted. Along with that, it also helped from the security aspect, right? The validation and automation and remediation part of it. But just to take a segue and pivot on another use case, which we are seeing, is the AI SOC model. I think there are a lot of tools out there from the SOC perspective, AI SOC perspective, and that has significantly improved over the time. And we are seeing the difference. In our organization, we have utilized multiple tools from the AI SOC perspective, along with the security operations program overall. The number of alerts, incidents we used to get, we are trying to take the steps how we can automate that process. We definitely need a human in between. It's an extension of our SOC, but then it's helping us to automate that process and bring down those numbers of review significantly. And whatever the exceptions which are jumping out to us, we are having a thorough review. So it's giving time to our SOC team analysts, engineers to basically look at those and spend time to more meaningful alerts versus looking into the noise, the false positives, or even benign true positives, which we know. And that's been taken care, and we have shifted towards more AI SOC perspective. That's another shift we are seeing significantly. And I'll turn it over to Alex. Anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Bakul. So definitely, what AI transformed and means and what's the end journey for everyone. And maybe I'll go and explain what in my vision, North Star of that is, because we are still in the middle of transformation. Yes, definitely, part of transformation will be acquiring tools, right? But I want to make sure that, AI transformed like the finish line doesn't mean that we bought a lot of tools and maybe operationalize them, right? So to me, transform means that we're treating AI like a production infrastructure, right? That is fully documented, fully owned, governed, and tested, and also observable, right? Um, like at any time, we should be able to tell, what AI systems we have. We should have like a solid inventory, right? We should have a full visibility of what data AI systems touch and what autonomy they have, and like who is accountable for what without like digging and running a chicken without head when something happens, right? And then on top of that, we want to make sure that we standardize security through standards, right? So called like golden standards. So team move fast, but they're not reinventing controls every time there is a new use case or a new tool they need to onboard, right? And then, anytime when model drifts or, prompts gets abused or like, let's say behavioral changes, right? We need to be able to detect it, contain it, and roll back cleanly with evidence. And with this, when I say we reached AI transform end state is I want to make sure that, we're able to produce assurance on demand and, any failures that AI creates don't create confusion when it happens.
Great points. Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I talked to a lot of CISOs and I remember before I came to the dark side and, looking at how AI could transform, and I looked at it from the org chart perspective, right? Where in the org chart could I use AI as a force multiplier, right? And I remember the board looking at me nuts when I showed the org chart and said, hey, they're like, well, who are those guys? Because those are just single funky names. And I said, well, those are our AI agents that are going to perform that task. They're like, well, who manages them? And I'm like, well, you have the functional role, the program owner that owns AppSec, Vuln, et cetera, CTEM, whatever you want to call it these days. And they're managing that because they're understanding what the jobs to be done and what the outcome is, and they're building and designing the agents to deliver the outcome. I talked to a CISO not about a month or so ago, and he's like, "Yeah, we completely whacked AppSec, gone." And this is a multi-billion-dollar chip manufacturer. And he's like, yeah, it's a little weird because it's just AI. Like it just follows behind our developers and fixes their code for them. And um, he's like double-edged sword. My developers have gotten extremely lazy in how they write code because they just expect AI to fix it for them. But at the same time, I've been able to redeploy the resources and I have 100% coverage of all code being written or generated and checked in. I'm like, you're a brave soul. That's all I can say. Um, so I like to the next part of that is, the who owns that risk once you've actually decided. So in like that scenario, the CISO owns the risk of vulnerabilities getting through. But who would, in your opinions, who owns the risk as you enable that aspect of your uh, program to leverage AI at maybe not at that level of autonomy, but even the augmentation aspect. And Alex, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, to me, always like who owns the risk? I always try to explain that usually business owner is accountable and owns the risk, right? Business owner is accountable for the purpose and risk tolerance of using AI systems and what they have designed, right? Where engineering, and engineers, right, whatever department actually does the deployments and builds, they really own, a secure build of that, right? A deployment of that and operational resilience, right? Where security infosec sets the control framework for that. And they do threat models and they do independent assurance of what gets implemented, right? And then all the vendors that you use for that, if you onboard them, if you use commercial products, they're accountable through measurable obligations, right? Like you have, MSA signed with them, DPAs, and so on and so on, right? And then if you bake that all into your cybersecurity program, you pretty much name the owners, you create clear RACI, and then, you have appropriate release gates, you have proper incident playbooks, and then proper escalation path, right? So in your example, it is the cheap manufacturing. I hope they do have some sort of validation, right? Where they have a multi-tier program where, yeah, AI may be writing a code and fixes the code, but there should be some layer that actually does an assurance of that, right? Whether it's a human assurance through a pen testing or, these days it has to be an always on pen testing. We need to all move away from any annual pen test mentality. And then maybe a strong bug bounty program even, right? Because this way you can measure like, is AI making mistakes? Is AI releasing insecure code? And, analyzing all those root causes when something gets discovered or reported by researchers. So yeah, that's to me, that's kind of a clear racy, right? Who owns what?
I'm going to come back to that because I've got an interesting question there. But Bakul, how about you?
Yeah, so kind of agree to Alex on that part. Obviously, and the business owner could be IT as well, because if the AI use case is IT, then it would be the business owner. But you need to define for that the AI risk exposure, like who is named and ownership and the accountability. Obviously, there would be some part from engineering side, the security side, to work it. They would be helping it, but then you need to have that clear definition, the clear purpose in the inventory. That's really important because what you're looking is what is the expected outcome, and there is a level of autonomy. Like, is it advising the human? For example, you talked about I'll continue with the same of SDLC automation process, right? What is that code is going to provide? Is it internal, external? Is it customer facing, right? There could be a huge impact based on the outcome. And is there any prioritization? And can it tie to another agents and the decision making? So you need that kind of a traceability. What AI influenced the decision, and then you are able to reconstruct that so that it's not fuzzy at the time. Who owns that? And thirdly, you need evidence, you need observability, you need the testing results. So obviously, at the time of it, like Alex mentioned, there should be human in between. There should be test results which has been calibrated. There should be the metrics. And I feel like just complete automation may not be at the time of the impact, you would want to see the results or the outcome, because you don't want to blame AI for that. It's basically somebody at the human level who is responsible, and that should be the business owners.
Charles, I know you went off camera there. I don't know if you were able to hear.
No, I heard I was getting a
Okay.
drink of water. I apologize. I'm,
No, no,
fighting a nice cold
no.
from my last trip.
No worries. No worries. So, love to hear your chiming in around the ownership of the risk.
Yeah, I think the ownership of the risk is a shared model, and I think both Alex and Bakul really nailed what you need to put in place. We all have been around with AI councils and have talked about, okay, where does the risk lie? And it's a shared risk because it stretches across the entire company. And so my perspective is, I see Alex's shop as very well mature in terms of, getting down to that racy because as Bakul indicated, you have to have ownership. Ownership is super important, and all of that needs to be delineated. Oftentimes we just, the business says, "Hey, I want to go do this," and we're like, "Okay, we'll try to put some guardrails around it," but then we don't get to that deeper level. And the ownership is shared. It's the team that needs to use the AI tool for whatever they're doing, shares part of the risk, as well as, depending on, like in my world, legal has a big say in a lot of things that we do because we're public safety. And so our RACI has, legal, infosec, and then the business owners, as those three are held accountable for the AI tools that are being in use and ensuring that we are protecting the data that gets used within them.
Agreed. I love the racy aspect of this, and I think that does two things. One, it actually breaks down the concept of building, defining the workflow, defining the guardrails, and defining the outcomes that those agents are going to drive, in getting the conversation going around that ownership of risk and where the risks truly are. But now let me ask the question. They're your agents. They're InfoSec's AI. Inside of your org, how would you actually explain what that RACI looks like from, let's say from you and the outcome that you're saying that your team needs to achieve to the functional domain leadership that you've actually brought on, and then their ICs and engineers that are responsible for implementing the agents? Start with Charles, I'll stay with you.
Yeah, so with the agents that we leverage and run, I believe that, my team owns that risk holistically. So we are responsible. And as the leader of that business unit, I am responsible ultimately to report on those agents, and our almost every security tool that you can look at and buy now has AI built into it. So it's a matter of fact that we're using AI agents across our businesses. Whether you know it or not, you are indeed using it. And so when it comes to ownership and that risk, that's the risk we take on. Now, we do consult with legal and like with HR and as well as, the various business units to ensure that, we're not necessarily breaking any of their processes when we put those automations into place. Sometimes you do need to break something. If you're dealing with something that like a malware breach, you're going to isolate that system and move on and clean it and, then return it back. Well, that can cause a big problem if that's running a 2-week test of translation services in your environment. And that's just an example of, where it is a lot of risk that we have taken on and we continue to take on, sometimes unintentionally, because underneath our some of our tools are those AI models that are being leveraged in the background. And so it also flows into data as well. We have to ensure that we meet our data classification and our data retention policies.
Cool. Bakul, how about you?
Yeah, and I think I touched upon this a little bit before. Like even if it is security systems, the ownership resides in this case, the responsibility resides with the security team because they are the named business owner in this case. And I think it does not changing that much if you look at the holistic view because we have our platforms, we are responsible for it even now in the AI transformed security programs that we have any agentic solutions or AI systems. And as Charles mentioned, like we have pretty much every platform with AI embedded, that's reside with the security team. And the same escalation paths, the playbook may change because the expected outcomes would change. What is there? There should be addition of or enhancements of red teaming exercise because these are continuous metrics and the measurement that needs to be done for the AI perspective. Your security stack should be extended as well because you want to put lot more controls as compared to other tools because security has a lot more information which is being collected, whether it's from the data perspective. So if it is something which is externally being exposed, I would highly advise and should have the zero trust framework within that. And if it is internal in itself, all those controls, whether they range from identity, from data access, from the logging, monitoring, auditing, has been put in place. So in terms of overall holistic view, it would remain the same. Obviously, you have to go with the third-party risk. Those come into account. The governance has to be tied in. But if you're maintaining the AI risk register and the exposure, the name of the security team would own those systems.
And Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything said. For AI systems being used within InfoSec, yeah, I am the ultimate business owner, right? Accountable for what those AI systems do. Like, take for example, I don't know, security operations, right? Like if you're after automating security operations, you want to make sure that it pretty much you're confident what your AI-enabled security automation does, right? And that's where, as previously Bakul said, human in the loop is very important. You don't start with, oh, I trust AI will handle all the events, identify incidents, and so on and so on, right? I think every company needs to look into starting from AI being an assistant rather than a full, a fully virtualized, agent, right? AI agent that does all the work, right? Yeah, like even though, like on our side, I proudly say that, hey, we have like a level one security analyst working full time for us, which is AI agent, but there is always a level two, level three analyst that checks the work of L1 analysts, right? So yeah, that's where it's important. And that's like I said previously, if InfoSec owned AI system fail, the responsibility can be ambiguous, right? We own that. Human in the loop is important. And that's why you need to implement and look into these multi-tiered systems, right? Same applies to AppSec, like I mentioned previously. If you trust AI to write the code or identify vulnerabilities, you better have a human in the loop to actually validate or have a process that you will guarantee that AI is acting the way it should be, right? Or identifying vulnerabilities properly or doing a secure code development. And that's why you need to create that program that does that assurance for you, whether it's again, human in the loop, or there is some capability that has an AI assistant doing this. Again, I'm talking about AI assisted pen testing, but yeah, if you talk to some of those companies and mature companies who do this today, even they say we don't pretty much they always have a human in the loop to check the pen test, actions and stuff, right? Because the pen testing, AI-enabled pen testing and fully automated, I don't believe into that story yet. That can go rogue and it can just crash you.
Yeah, I have a head of engineering that I am truly fearful of. And there is not a chance in heck that I would turn on, like, go to, I use Shannon all the time just to test stuff. And like, if I turn that on with an agent to automate that on a daily basis and feed it into, tools, I guarantee I would have a shelf life, if not real life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can do it in like development or test and sandbox environment just to see the power of it, right? And understand like, oh, if I turn this on for production, what could possibly happen, right? And then tune from there. Have human in the loop, right? Just continue training. Yeah, maybe one day in 2 years it will become a full autonomous
Yeah,
and
and
safe.
I think that takes us to the next question is, how do you balance the speed of AI adoption, when you're looking at that need for RACEs, standardized controls, guardrails, sanity checks, even voice of reason, like, hey, knucklehead, why'd you do that in prod? And Bakul, I'd love to start with you there, and then we'll take it up and around and sorry, my screen.
Yes. I think from the architectural guardrails controls perspective, it is essential to have a pre-approved patterns. Something which you have based on the past AI use cases to bucket it and categorize into this category of single, and then whatever the controls you have put into place, whatever the architecture reviews have you done, it can be reused for any new AI use case. So it's when those new AI use cases are coming, it's frictionless, and you're able to allow that to move into production fast. Now, some of the things, and this is my personal opinion, we are trying to do is we are trying to centralize the common platform. Like I'll categorize it from the AI use case perspective. If you're talking about the generative AI, there are multiple platforms out there, very well known, whether it's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude. So if you have a selective generative AI use case for the end users, and then you have put a guardrails, you have data classifications, you have segmented and what has been allowed, you can extend it pretty fast, to additional population. Similarly, if you're talking about the agentic solutions, if you have common platforms, which you have used your current security stack from the identity, from your data, from other controls in place, and then you also extend it to your AI security use cases, like Alex mentioned, you could do some level of validation, the pen testing across those. If there is a data drift, if there is a misrepresentation, if the decisions which is advising the human based on the outcomes, if they are malicious. So that kind of, which can be added to your current stack. And those overall, the risk and the controls which you have, you can put it into those common platform, which is centralized. So if the new AI use case is coming from the agentic side, and that is something which can be supported by your common platform, it is much easier for it to be adopted fast. And similarly for your SaaS and the third-party reviews as well. If it is the AI which is embedded into those systems, what all measures you have taken into those, what are the controls you have put into place, and that can be the reason I said in the categorization, because it depends on the use case, and we have seen to work much faster. Obviously, there is an architectural review which comes into place. There would be exceptions which needs to be noted down, and those exceptions may have a different platform, and you would work around it. But if you have those common, consolidated platforms based on the use cases and the categorization, I think most of the use cases can be fulfilled and easy to be adopted in much speedier way with security and controls in mind.
Awesome. Charles?
Yeah, so I would have to echo what Bakul said. If you look at where we're at, just the speed, it's hard. And it's hard because, the business always wants you to go faster, always wants you to go and build quicker. And you have all that pressure, and then you have this tool that allows you to do it. And people are sometimes forget about some of the ramifications of using that tool. I'm a smaller shop, so we have a lot of policies and standards. And so, as Bakul indicated, we standardized on one platform, and then we provide exceptions through an approval process that flows through, your legal, your HR, and, and who actually owns that risk. They have to assume the risk when they're bringing in an additional tool. And that's how we have approached it because we just don't have the bandwidth or the size to implement a lot of what Bakul talked about. But that is, from my perspective, the right path that we need to be on because it's balancing that speed with ensuring that we can still do it securely. And that's where, like, Claude was very disruptive. I mean, it was. And, and we're seeing a little bit of a fallout from that with everything going on right now between the US federal government and Claude. So I think it's always going to be a challenge. We had the same challenge, I think, when you look at when cloud burst onto the scene. Oh, how fast can you get me to cloud? And there were people that will just, basically taking their current environment and forklifting it up there without really actually doing the work to take advantage of what the cloud has to offer. And so that's why we need to have the governance. We need to understand those risks and we need to be able to execute and balance all of that.
Moving on to Alex. I want to hear.
Yeah, I think to add to everything said, which I fully agree with Bakul and Charles, I think I fully agree that it's important to understand and define kind of standard patterns, right? So-called like golden standards. Like, what is your standard for identity for AI systems, right? Or data handling, or logging, or monitoring, right? What are the guardrails? If you can create a system where you can apply these controls repeatedly to whether it's an MCP server or, some sort of AI agent, you will win this game because if you start treating every AI use case as kind of a unique use case, then you will always become a bottleneck, right? Security will become a bottleneck. Yeah, it's funny, like one of the first standards that we developed, the very first one was an MCP standard, right? Because developers wanted to use MCP for this, MCP for that. And we're like, as we define that standard, we define categories in there, right? Like how would MCP does like authentication authorization, right? How we would do do logging, how we would monitor, like, identify, threats, what the kind of, log the behaviors what MCP does and then identify threats out of that, right? And then you can quickly see that, oh, the same kind of categories can apply to any AI agent. And then that's why it's important to create those standard patterns, right? Because that will help you pretty much to repeat and re-implement and apply it to anything that you want.
And just to want to add for us on the Alex point, like how AI is progressing, especially if we talk about, we started with generative AI, we came into the Gentic now, we saw the OpenClaw. At least from my personal, I've seen like it was a little bit tough to get to the AI use cases. It has to be, in now day and age, like anybody can install and they can start working on it. So there are the factors. It is a must needed standardization for it to allow the teams to come to the security beforehand. And for that, these standardization and pre-approved patterns are required. There would definitely be exceptions, but if you start having those more and more, you would have shadow AI back, which is working, and that becomes more critical and impacting adversely from the security point of view. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. So we've all mentioned standardizing platform and guardrails so that AI, can move faster. It's not a edge case every time. It's not reinventing the wheel every time. What does that guardrail layer look like? Like, I mean, to me, I think there's two control planes in the industry, right? There's the vendors and what they're saying you need to have and what they're building and buying and all that and selling to us. And then there's what we're building inside of the programs because we understand our businesses and we understand what the climate, both culturally as well as from a layer 8 perspective, we can actually accomplish, right? So I'd love to kind of understand where you're seeing success, what guardrails you're leveraging, and where you're seeing success, not only in the implementation, but from the business's acceptance that these are guardrails that, we can live with and that we can actually operate within. So, cool. I want to start with you.
Yeah, so one of the things which we are trying to do is to understand, we first of all need to have the AI inventory and to understand the associated risk with it. And we talk about the guardrails and the controls. We are trying to put a risk taxonomy, especially if we talk about the AI systems, whether there is the misuse of the data, like there is a data drift, the data exposures, the harmful output. Obviously, we are using some tools and technology to understand that categorization, and then we are looking into mapping those and whatever controls we can put in place. Now, one of the examples which I gave earlier was the consolidated common platform. We have a couple of the platforms which we are using. And what we are doing is we have actually put some kind of validation based on those risk taxonomies uh, and validating against those. Now we are documenting those controls as well, and we are making sure those are repeatable process. So these are very high level, but we also tied those to the outcomes, whatever the technical failures which comes to what would be the impact, whether if it is customer related, would it lead to the customer bad decisions, whether it would have a regulatory exposures, whether there is an operational disruption. So those kind of things we are mapping into. And based on that, we are putting the control depending on the use case, right? And the outcome. And these, when we talked about, I know we talked about the internal and external, and these are being documented so that these are recorded in with the named unit owners, define the autonomy levels, the testing results, the monitoring thresholds, the drift detections, and if in case something fails, what are the rollback controls you are doing, or even containments or remediations. And that we have used actually to showcase and to present it in a structured evidence to the third parties. And we are also adding that into our questionnaires. When we talk about the TPRM questionnaires, some of it we are also adjusting to what questionnaires we get because we are learning from the third parties, what they are experiencing. And we are also including from our internal learning to those TPRM. And we ensure that those TPRM questions we are able to answer, which are documented and presented, so that we can build trust with the external parties on that. And that could be regulators, that could be auditors, whether it's internal or external, that could be the customers. And I would say even to the board, like we have put the AI risk exposure and posture, tied it to our enterprise risk management. And we periodically showcase it to our board. What is the risk exposure and how we are managing it? If you are able to show what is the AI risk, if you have the documented controls around it, and if you can present it, I think you are able to showcase that.
Awesome. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think defining a strong framework that you're going to use is important. And for example, like the AIC framework, right, and the standard that we all contributing to is, to me, is a pretty strong example of that, right? Because it summarizes all the frameworks. And I use it actively today as well, right? Whenever we define an internal standard, I borrow a lot of statements what needs to be met in the framework, right? Whether it's for security, safety, or data and privacy, and so on. So if you have a strong framework in play, right, and when somebody introduces a new, a tool or capability, I want to use something like that, that strong framework can be applied, right? And you can assess that capability, say, hey, what am I doing for prompt injection, right? What am I doing to, make sure system doesn't have a bias, for example, right? And I think having that installed like at the beginning of the journey and part of your framework is very important because that will provide an evidence later to any auditors that you have, right? Because You have an evidence of using a strong framework, and you have an evidence of assessment against that framework whenever you design or introduce a new AI system.
Cool. Charles, we'll take it home with you, and then we've got some audience questions.
Sounds good. I very much appreciate Bakul and Alex. I have to say, we standardized on a framework as well, and we use that framework. And similar to Bakul, I tied the outcomes to anything that was going to be an exception to our standard approach is tied to an outcome. And if that outcome does not come to fruition, then the exception is removed. And then we always add those exceptions into our overall ERM to ensure that we are tracking through a risk registry what those AIs that besides, just our standards that are in play in our environment. And that enables us to reach back down to any of the business owners and say, okay, so tell me about this outcome. Have you actually achieved what you were stating you were going to achieve within 6 months of bringing this tool in-house? And so it's been really good. And we highlight that obviously up to the senior leadership team and the board as well. So.
Okay. No, that's great. Yeah, you bring up an interesting point on the risk register. I do want to get to the audience questions, but there's been efforts to, you take your security tooling stack and the intelligence layer underneath it, and that actually has the ability to look at it and say, okay, this belongs in the risk register. Let's go right to the risk register over here in Google Sheets or Vanta or whatever tool of choice you were using, right? I think the first time I saw one of our folks do a test, they end up with just over 35,000 risk register entries. And I'm like, holy crap, this is worse than like connecting, your VM scanner to your ITSM tool. It's like, I've never seen something that bad. But it's indicative of like AI is just reasoning like, oh no, you can't fix that. That's a risk. Write it over here. Like it's binary to it. It didn't understand like maybe there's context to that risk that you're not actually looking at, right? But yeah, that was a funny story. So question from the audience. So when third parties ask about AI governance, what's the one artifact or piece of evidence that you think would convince them that you have it under control? And I want to preface this with most auditors or third parties coming in still don't know what they're asking, right? They're just learning. So I want to put that, and let's start with you, Alex.
Yeah,
Do a rapid.
yes, so auditors and regulators, they start to move from, tell me kind of questions to show me question, right? They're all about evidence, right? And for AI systems, they will ask you to have an AI inventory or a risk tiering, right? How you classify the risk for AI systems. And again, they will ask you about ownership, who owns what. And then obviously the testing evidence. Let's say if you're using AIUC control, right, the framework, they will ask you line by line saying, how do you test for this control? How do you test for that control? That's why it's important if you adopt that framework, you need to become maybe a more mature and leveraging it and make sure you have capabilities to provide that evidence when they ask.
Yeah. Charles, one artifact, piece of evidence.
So the piece of evidence we as a team typically use is pretty similar to Alex, from the standpoint of we go back to our policy and our standards, and then the evidence we pull out are the security exceptions and then the control points that we've put in place to control everything else that isn't allowed in our environment. And I haven't gotten to the point where a lot of our regulators or auditors have actually said, show me that. We just provide that initially, and there hasn't been a lot. I'm anticipating this year they'll start to move to the show me more instead of just tell me.
Cool.
I kind of agree with both Charles and Alex. One of the things, at least we have seen from our side, is more what Charles alluded before, is the AI risk register, because it would contain if there is a hard documented evidence, if you have the inventory, the named owner, as well as whatever the controls you have put in place, what is the registral risk and how are you managing? And that would be in your AI risk register. So if you are able to present that with and able to explain with hard evidence, we have seen the auditors accepting that.
Okay. So here's the next one. I like that. So somebody found it interesting that we're tying AI exceptions to the business outcomes. So the question is, have you ever had to remove or shut down an AI tool because it didn't deliver the outcome that justified the risk? So I'm going to just keep running through that loop of Alex, Charles, and then Bakul.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember a case. There was a case where um, a tool that everybody wanted to use, and to provide the justification of how useful it can be, but then the company didn't have any third-party validation, whether it's a SOC 2 Type 2 or ISO. And, with my team being a small department, we leverage that a lot, right? We rely on third-party validation and insurance. And that was pretty much a hard no for us, saying, yeah, we like the capability doesn't have a third-party validation. So we kind of set it up as a rule. We try not to make any exceptions. If the system is accessing production system and production data, your Google Drive documents, and they don't have third-party validation, that's a hard no for me
Yeah.
today.
Charles, how about you?
Yeah, so we had one instance of that recently, just about a month and a half ago. Towards the end of last year, we brought in a third party who specialized in translation services. As you can imagine, dealing with public safety and dealing with the public, we speak a lot of different languages across the US. And so, we need to get that pretty accurate. And similar to Alex, they did not have a SOC 2 Type 2. So we allowed them to put it into the sandbox, put it into the development basically sandbox. And at the end of the day, it it didn't work as effectively and as efficiently in terms of translations. And so because of that, we yanked it.
Hmm. Nice. And Bakul, how about you?
One of the example we experienced is from the marketing side. There was a AI tool used especially for the marketing, and there was a couple of tools which were being tested at the time. One, systematically, we have to shut it off both for the security reasons and from the operational side. They didn't have SOC 2 Type 2. We threw in the security questionnaire, security and privacy questionnaire, and at that time, it seems to have the over privileges with the integrations of other tools which have the sensitive data uh, as we compare to the other, because it was a startup and they didn't have much of isolation for the data which they were ingesting to. And there could be a potential post to your company platforms. And when we did for the review, we identified they didn't have a control. There was not even an approval process to post. That was, hard no, so that we kind of pulled the plug and we decided to go with the other platform in this case.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be scary. You know, I think my marketing team would freak if all of a sudden AI was doing posting. All right, last question, and then we'll wrap up here. So we mentioned surfacing this to the board, right? And the board operates way up here, right? They generally try to say, "Hey, just let us know that you're doing something." Right? That we're not, looking at an exposure or risk exposure here. What are the questions, the AI risk questions that boards are starting to ask now that they weren't a year ago, right? Because they've had a year to kind of mature their knowledge of AI and knowledge of the risk of AI. So I'm going to go reverse it here and I'm going to start with Bakul.
Yeah, so one of the things they're asking is like, do you know what all AI use cases are in the environment? Do you know who is the business owner is? What is the clear purpose of those? Have you created the risk inventory for those corresponding AI use cases? And what's the expected output, right? For this AI adoption, are they giving the results? And then from the correspondingly, is the expected outcome is being yielded, or you are seeing some abnormal behaviors, right? Whatever the failures. The other aspect which is tied to is, especially with the board, it's not only from the security, it's a overall high level landscape. Is what is the ROI? I'm seeing like a lot of this being questions, a lot of adoption is happening. What is the fast process tying into the AI? But is it giving the ROI, or it's even eating the cost associated? Do we need to go back to the human-driven formats? Those kind of things. And then from the security landscape, we are saying, okay, is there any impact which is being seen? And are we able to help with the speedy adoption for the AI new use cases? So those are some of the metrics which we have presented and put. Because of that, we also had the AI Governance Council in place, so that any things which we have come, we build the policies, we circulated it, we have the acknowledgement, and we also did the awareness so that the teams are aware what needs to be done. And if in case they see some kind of impact early in the stage, they can bring in the security. So those are the things which we are seeing, especially, and we are reporting into the board.
Okay. Charles, let's move to you.
Yeah, I have not received a lot of questions from the board last year around AI. And on this year's first board meeting, the questions that came in were very similar to what Bakul. What is our exposure? How are we managing risk associated with AI? What's our adoption rate? And what's our ROI? And you know, it's pretty challenging because I can't speak to a lot of the business units on the ROI, but I can speak to the other aspects of it. And so I think we're going to continue to see that. They're going to learn more about the risks associated with it and how we're managing those risks so that they can make some business decisions, especially when they're looking at ROI across the different various business units.
Yep. Okay. And Alex, take us home.
Yeah, so for me, this is my first CISO job and the first year being CISO, right? So my board exposure just started this year, and the question I've been asked, not specific to AI, but it was a same question that was asked twice now. The question was, what risks keep me up at night as a CISO, right? So recently, I actually, on top of, data loss risks and stuff, I actually started to say that uncontrolled AI usage is what keeps me up at night as well. Because I think to me, the biggest risk in any companies right now is shadow AI, because everybody wants to move fast and everybody wants to use real data within AI tools, and those may not be approved, right? That's why it's important to make sure that organization has at least starting points, right? Whether it's, you have a formed AI council or AI champion program, all your engineers are trained. What will it take to, review, approve AI tool, and what process they need to follow? Just all those basic needs to be put in place to at least have some control over AI usage to start with, and then you will mature, obviously, over time.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to see over the course of this year a lot more knowledgeable board members around where like NIST AI RMF across the entire program, the AI you see at the agent level, you know, collaboration between business and security around shadow AI control. And then, what's the actual process for moving that into an accepted use? I also think we're going to see, and we see a lot of it right now around in InfoSec, the rise of the context engineering role. And I think that's going to become, it normally would reside inside the data team, but I think it's actually going to have to move out. I see the BISO roles actually evolving into more of a context. Like, what context does your business unit bring to the table, and what do we need to actually make sure is being included in AI, in the data sets, into the metadata, et cetera. But no, I think this has been a phenomenal session. I think it's going to get tougher and tougher as we get going. But I think, Alex, like, we've got the open source project on the AIUC side, which is actually going to take the entire framework and define and the controls and actually start to build automated testing for agents. So I think like I said, that two control layers, one at the vendor level and then one at the practitioner level. I think there's going to be a race, actually, and it's a race for dollars and a race for peace of mind, actually, in a program, right? For us.
Yeah. And the rest for awareness, right? Like I think we as CISO will need to continue training board members so
Oh,
they can understand what AI risks are.
yeah,
Agreed.
Like,
agreed. All right, maybe we'll make that one of our sessions for this quarter or next quarter. How do we train the board?
yeah, what messaging we should be sending. I
Yeah,
think that will be very useful,
okay,
especially for me being a first-time CISO.
sounds good. All right, well, folks, I appreciate everything. Alex, Charles, Bakul, always a pleasure, and look forward to the next session. Have a great
Thanks,
morning.
Thanks,
Bakul.
Thank you,
Chris.
everyone.
Thanks,
Chris,
Bakul,
Looking
thanks,
forward
Alex.
for
everyone.
next time.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.